In this video, I'd like to discuss a phenomenon in Wonder Woman I call time dilation. The concept of time dilation is taken from physics, specifically the special theory of relativity. Here's a definition from Wikipedia. Time dilation is a difference in the elapsed time as measured by two observers, either due to a velocity difference relative to each other or by being differently situated relative to a gravitational field. So let's think about time in Wonder Woman. Over what period of time does the action of the movie take place? Well, for the viewer, 2 hours and 10 minutes. For present-day Diana, whose reminiscence frames the movie, I used to want to save the world, quote unquote, perhaps an hour or two. For the Diana whose experience is the subject of the movie, hundreds, perhaps thousands of years transpire from the time she first appears to us as a child and the time she leaves the island. But counting the years of Themyscira's existence is perhaps meaningless. Yes, the sun rises and sets each day, the moon and stars appear and spin through their seasons. But until Steve arrives, the Amazons have no clocks, no calendars. The island's history begins when time was new. The Amazons live in a perpetual present filled by warrior training for a time and an enemy that may never come. Once Steve comes to the island, however, time kicks in. The action of the movie from that point takes place over 5 days. 5 days when suddenly no one has enough time. Ludendorff and Dr. Moreau are out of time. Steve wishes he and Diana had more time. There is so little time to get from London to German High Command that there is no time to save anyone along the way. Diana and Steve face the same choice. Do nothing and let events unfold, the flow of time undisturbed, or do something, interrupt time, to find a now which divides an old static past from a new dynamic future. In the movie, both Diana and Steve decide to act, and time begins. The action of the movie takes place over 5 days. Day 1 begins with Diana's first appearance to us as an adult on the training ground, and ends at night with Diana and Steve sailing to London. Day 2 begins with Diana waking up in the morning as their boat approaches London, and ends at night with the pub scene. Day 3 begins in the morning with Diana and Steve at the train station on the way to the front, and ends that night at the camp where the chief has been waiting. Day 4 begins in the morning with Diana, Steve, and the Oddfellows walking towards the trenches, and ends that night after the liberation of Veld and Diana and Steve's love scene. Day 5 begins in the morning in Veld, concludes with a night battle with Ares, who is destroyed just as the sun rises on what would have been Day 6. I would like to talk about 2 examples of time dilation in the movie. The first is on Day 1. It is mid-afternoon at the conclusion of the battle on the beach, 23 minutes, 10 seconds into the movie, as indicated by the shadows on the sand. We cut to the throne room for Steve's interrogation. How much movie time has elapsed? By movie time, I mean the flow of time as represented in the movie, as it would be indicated by the movement of the sun or by clocks and calendars residing inside the world the movie depicts. By, for example, Steve's wristwatch. Screen time, on the other hand, is time as measured by a viewer's watch. We see in the throne room that Diana's wound has been hurriedly bandaged, suggesting a battlefield dressing. We can imagine that immediately after the battle ends, medics run to care for the wounded and remove the dead. At the same time, Steve is hustled up to the throne room for interrogation. Very little time passes between the end of the scene on the beach and Steve's interrogation. A wide shot of the throne room as the interrogation scene opens shows the open sky still in mid-afternoon light. The interrogation scene takes 4 minutes and 37 seconds. When it ends, Hippolyta, her retinue, and Diana exit onto a portico at what appears to be a bit later in the afternoon. Diana insists that the war is the work of Ares and their duty is to go with Steve to find and kill him. But her mother tells her to do nothing. An additional minute and 6 seconds of screen time have elapsed. So far, screen time and movie time are essentially in sync. We cut to the infirmary cave, where Diana's wound is being tended by a physician. How much movie time has elapsed between the end of the previous scene and the beginning of this one? Steve has been removed from the throne room and brought to the physician while Diana and her mother are out on the portico. This is made clear by the exchange between Diana and the physician at the beginning of the scene. "Is it true you saved his life?" the physician asks her. "Who told you that?" Diana responds. "He did," the physician replies. After the confrontation between Diana and her mother, there would be no reason for Diana to wait to have her wound treated, and there's no evidence in the movie to suggest any substantial time delay. This scene between Diana and Steve lasts 4 minutes and 15 seconds and ends on Steve's line, "And I already tried nothing." This resolves Diana to disobey her mother, and we cut to Diana outside near the tower, now pitch dark, hours and hours after sunset. Again, there is no reason to think that Diana delayed going to the tower to retrieve the God-Killer. From the end of the confrontation between Diana and her mother, at 28 minutes 53 seconds into the movie, in the late afternoon, and Diana's appearance at the tower, 33 minutes 8 seconds into the movie, far into the night, 4 minutes and 15 seconds of screen time have elapsed. But many hours of movie time. Of course, a disconnect between screen and movie time is common in film. Consider what is probably the most extreme and well-known example: the jump cut in 2001 from pre-human primates to space travel in the 21st century. Thousands, perhaps millions of years have elapsed in the blink of an eye. But this discontinuity is clearly signaled to the viewer, who realizes that huge amounts of movie time have passed, and hence there is no time dilation. But in Wonder Woman, the viewer is given no such signals. The film presents the viewer with an experience of continuous time, a stretch of time that amounts to minutes from the viewer's point of view, but seamlessly spans hours of movie time. It's as if movie time has sped up, perhaps to the point that 1 minute of screen time represents 1 hour of movie time. Day 5 is a particularly striking example of time dilation. Here, the day proceeds at an accelerated pace, as if it contained just a handful of hours, not 24. Day 5 begins at sunrise in the liberated Veld. We know it is sunrise because of the way the scene is lit, with warm yellow morning sunlight slanting in from a very low angle. As the few minutes of this scene unfold, notice how quickly the lighting changes to indicate a rapidly rising sun, rising much faster within the scene than is physically possible. Next, we cut to everyone on horseback riding towards the German castle. Again, if we pay attention to the way this scene is lit, it is clear that at most an hour or so have transpired between this and the previous scene. It is still morning, in fact early morning. Diana rides ahead while the men hang back to converse outside her hearing. The men's conversation on horseback takes but a few minutes, yet during those few minutes the lighting again changes in the way that suggests a very rapidly rising sun. Then there's a cut to a shot from a high angle looking back at them as they approach the camera. Then a reverse angle shot shows the castle looming ahead of them. Diana spurs her horse forward. How much time has elapsed between the end of the men's conversation and the high angle shot looking back at them? Well, of course we don't know, but it could hardly be more than an hour in real time. Note they are still in the same positions, with Diana ahead and the guys hanging back. And don't forget that later in the movie, Diana and Steve will race to Veld and back to the castle in what almost seems like no time. Yet by the time we see them hiding in the bushes outside the castle in the next scene, it is already late afternoon or early evening. From this point forward, the action is nearly continuous, with the exception of some off-screen action between the time Steve and Sammy get past the guards, while Diana appropriates the blue dress, and when they both appear in the ballroom. They've been out of sight from us, the viewers, perhaps an hour of movie time at the most, probably less. Then there's the scene in the ballroom between Steve and Dr. Moreau, the one between Diana and Ludendorff, and Steve confronting Diana. Diana races out in the late evening, the sun having already set. The gas is launched at Veld. Diana rides furiously to see what has happened to the villagers, Steve following her. There's another confrontation between the two. Diana races back to the castle, Steve in pursuit on a motorcycle. And note that the viewer is clearly signaled that night is rapidly falling by the bike's headlight. Again, all of this action is continuous and unfolds in real time, yet the day proceeds very rapidly. Diana speeds past the bonfire set by the chief blazing against the darkened sky and crests the hill. And suddenly it's the middle of the night and pitch dark except for the lights of the munitions factory. The battle with Ludendorff, the scene with Steve on the watchtower, the appearance of Sir Patrick, the business with the plane, the blowing up of the munitions plant, the pitched battle between Diana and Ares, all of this takes place in what must essentially be real time, an hour or two at the very most, and then, moments after Ares is destroyed, the sun rises. Day 5 is the clearest example of this time dilation, but time dilation is evident to a greater or lesser extent in each of the 5 days. I would argue that this approach to pacing and storytelling is not characteristic of classic movie structure. In Casablanca, for instance, the realistic passage of time between scenes is very clearly signaled to viewers. The use of time dilation gives the movie a storybook feeling appropriate to a comic book or a superhero movie. These multiple instances of time dilation had to have been deliberate, had to have taken considerable planning and resources to execute in a way that audiences would not notice. Time dilation is part of what makes Wonder Woman not just a popcorn movie, but an outstanding example of the cinema art.